gay by gay.
Did your brain lag?
I had a lag. Yeah, I had a second of buffering.
Yeah, I sensed that. I just like looked over at you and I was like, "You good?"
Never.
I don't know. I'm off the
rails.
Your brain has been melting. The brain goo is so bad. It is sticking to everything. It's becoming like this. It's like a swamp in here.
Oh my god.
Are you okay?
No, the goo is now falling out of my mouth. Not literally. But listen, the goo has fallen from my ears to the floor. The floor is covered in brain jello.
Yeah, I know. Like it's seeping into my socks.
The brain gelatin.
It's seeping into my socks. Can you not though?
You and your socks.
So, topic for today. Take the goo back.
No.
You like spewed it all over me like the freaking Exorcist. Stop it.
This is the Exorcist spews. Fuck. Okay. Back on topic. We're talking about ace and aro representation today.
Which is basically fucking nothing.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it is fucking nothing because it's ace.
Oh, my ears.
So well there.
Okay, Abby. Throw me...
It's my time to shine, baby.
Throw me all of your anger about this.
What representation do we have for the ace community and especially the aromantic community? I will be out and honest. I am not aromantic. I am simply asexual. But I am willing to die on this hill for all of my aromantic people out there because no one ever goddamn talks about them like they're legitimate people, and they are legitimate people.
It's community
and I hate
thing.
it.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Makes me angry.
Yeah, it's a community thing.
As I had said to you, realistically, if you look up asexual characters in cartoons, we only get a couple of big ones. Mm-hmm. We get, I'm not familiar with this one. It's the one from BoJack Horseman.
I haven't watched it.
Not familiar with it. We get Alistair from Has Been Hotel, which, by the way, Has Been Hotel is one of my favorite things ever. No joke. Love it with a passion. Just, but then we get Peridot from Steven Universe. Oh. And we get goddamn SpongeBob.
Yeah.
That's it. What other representation do we have for asexuality?
Yeah.
Like, people that are very just clearly no. You know what I mean?
Well, even, like, blatant aceness.
Or, let's be real here, blatant aromanticness. Mm-hmm. When was the last time you saw a show or a movie where the main character didn't have a romantic plot line of some sort in some capacity? Whether it was unrequited love, whether it was a full romantic plot line, whether it was any of that stuff, or even where it was, oh, I love you, but we can't be together. Like, when did you ever see them just be like, nah?
Probably only horror movies. Honestly, like, a lot of movies these days are just based on so much romantic bullshit.
It's because it is something that everybody really feeds into. And I'll be honest, as I said, I am not aromantic, but I think it is incredibly frustrating that we cannot get a single story where romanticism or sexuality don't play some sort of major goddamn role. Yeah. And I'm tired. Especially because, I'll be really honest, there is quite a bit of gatekeeping even in the LGBT community where, for example, if you are hetero ace, it's almost like, well, you're not LGBT.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ace is one of them.
Yeah.
It's not just gay aces, it's ace. It's just so frustrating that I feel like ace people and aromantic people absolutely get shit on by everybody.
Yeah.
By media, by hetero people, by LGBT people. Like, where is that community?
Yeah. Anything.
They're out there, but it's almost like we've just completely been forgotten.
Yeah.
And it really does bother me. As I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with some of these characters. For example, Peridot is a great character in and of herself. SpongeBob, I mean, he's classic. He's a kid's cartoon, though. I mean, when you say, oh, he's asexual, aren't most cartoon characters for kids? Because I don't think sexuality is really a thing, but maybe I'm wrong.
Is that something that you struggle with? Even if you have ace representation, a lot of it is infantilized?
Yeah, realistically, like, when you think about it, when you think about an ace character, normally they come from a kid's show where it's questionable. Romanticism, yes. Sexuality, No. Do you know what I mean?
Do you think that people treat having a sexual nature as a hallmark of maturity, and if you don't have that sexual nature, you somehow aren't mature enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, it is a major problem where either it's treated as there is something wrong with you, there is something mentally wrong with you, you've had some sort of trauma, which means you're afraid, or you have some sort of physical problem where you can't and you're ashamed of it, so you hide it and you represent as asexual because you just don't want to deal with the pain. It's like, or some of us don't like it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it has been so... People just seem to refuse to accept that this is a thing for some people out there where, I know I've looked at you and Charlie and I take no offense because you guys look at me and you're like, so you just don't ever. And I'm like, no.
Well, just to me, it's so boggling because I'm not that way. So the experience is interesting.
And I think that's the trouble is that asexuality, I'm not going to say that we're a majority of people because we absolutely are not. We are a very, very, very small faction of people. But the problem is we get so much disbelief because it just doesn't seem to comprehend to other people that is a way of being.
Do you think...
It's almost like the way men don't realize that their magical penises won't just fix everything.
Do you think that there are a lot of ace people out there who don't know they're ace because they think, especially women who are kind of taught to believe that, sex isn't supposed to be enjoyable for you. Sex is something you do for someone else.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of women out there that would be perfectly happy never having sex, and they just don't seem to think that that's an option, or they think that, well, if I'm going to be in a relationship, it's something that I'm just going to have to put up with, and I hate that.
Do you think that romantic relationships, as an ace person, not an aro person, do you think that romantic relationships without sexual prowess are something important to be represented out there?
I think it is, because I'll be really honest, anytime you sort of broach that subject where it's like, I'm not aromantic, I still want a romantic partner. Anytime you even start to think, oh, well, they're going to want sex at some point. And I've had this conversation with my own mother, and she said, well, Abby, you know that they're going to expect that at some point. Almost as if my feelings are less valid than theirs. Just because they want sex, I have to give it to them. And, oh, well, your consideration is lesser because you just don't want to, but they're going to need it. And it's kind of like, no. Yeah. That's not how this works. And, it is absolutely difficult just kind of sitting here and thinking to myself, and, it is a thought that's gone through my head. Who would want to get into a relationship unless I can magically find another ace person? What regular person, which is a majority of everyone, what person is going to want to commit themselves to an asexual relationship if they themselves are not asexual?
I don't know.
And it's a major problem. And I'll be honest, I think this is something that the aro community doesn't necessarily have to face because they're not worried about making those romantic attachments outside of sex or even within the realm of sex. They're just not worried about their connection to other people that way. I think aces have it more difficult just in that we still want these relationships and, we as people deserve happy, loving relationships, but it is so much harder to find them and keep them, especially because you can say for the first little while, no, I'm not comfortable with that, I'm not comfortable with that, but eventually it is going to graduate to the point where it's like, well, if you're not going to put out, I'm either going to find someone else to do it or whatever, and I'm like, that's cheating. But... And yet it's plastered into my head where it's like, can you really expect that of them?
I imagine there's a lot more ace and aro people out there who do things performatively and who don't even know that they're almost doing it performatively.
I would absolutely say so. And I think it's another one of those things where I think that this isn't something that normally gets talked about, but I think there's actually levels to asexualism where being ace is just generally, oh, you don't want sex. But I think there's different levels to that because, there is sex with oneself. There is sex with other people. You know what I mean? And I think there are different levels of ace where you may be fine masturbating, but you may just not be okay with another person being involved.
And that's okay.
Exactly, but I feel like there's no representation for that. It very much feels like an all or nothing. Like, oh, if you feel any sexual desire, then it's just because you don't want to and it's because you have some sort of trauma or something. And it's like... Or I just don't ever want another person involved. I can feel things sexually, but just not with other people. And I feel like that gets missed.
I think even when ace people try to come out or say something about it, they feel like people put the pressure on them to explain why. tell me why you have these sexual preferences.
And you should have a goddamn legitimate reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, I was born that way. You know
don't...
how you like penis or you like vagina? I was just born not liking any of it. But I feel like that's very much not represented anywhere. It's not even accepted for the most part. I still feel like this is one community. You know, lesbians are much more accepted than they were before. Gays were much more accepted than they were before. I feel like Ace and Aro are constantly trying to explain themselves to everybody.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you should have a good reason for feeling that way. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. And do you know how long it has come? It has taken so long for me to come to the conclusion that I don't need a reason.
You don't need a reason.
I don't need to explain why I am the way I am.
Yeah.
And it took so long for me to even be honest with myself about how I was feeling, because I was almost horrified to some extent that I was feeling this way, because it was like, oh my God, something's wrong with me. Yeah. Where did this come from? When did this start? You know, looking back at it, I was just like, was it and I remember trying to work it through, and I had said, is it because I didn't have any like relationships in high school and middle school where, you know, I would have been developing my sexuality? Maybe it's just that I was never exposed to it in a personal way, and so somehow it didn't develop, and maybe there's something wrong. Maybe I'm underdeveloped.
Do you think that's a mythical conclusion that you were forced to think about?
Yes, to some extent, I do.
Under the assumption...
the trouble is I still question it to some extent, but that's what's so messed up about this.
But doesn't that have to be taken under the assumption that you can only be... You can only be ace
if something's wrong.
Yeah, and sexual maturity is something you need to have.
And that's exactly it. It feels like, oh, maybe I didn't mature sexually because I missed this pivotal moment in time.
And now I'm just broken for forever.
That's what it feels like. And that's very much the way a lot of people make you feel, where it's like, well, did something happen? And it's like, I don't know, did something happen? Did I miss something? Did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
Like, did I not?
Not that I know.
It's just so frustrating, you know?
So I think we'll take a break here, and we'll come back and talk more about...
Let me cool down a little bit, stop ranting for a minute.
Oh, you can rant. We love rants here.
Oh, yes.
Okay, see you soon, guys. Alright, guys, welcome back.
I've calmed down a little bit.
Yes.
Not a lot, but a little bit.
I also want to say, I've never been ace or aro before, obviously, but I also think it's important to mention that even if you are ace or aro out of trauma, you are extremely valid, and you don't need to tell people that if you decide to come out as either of those things.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's the other really disturbing thing when you really think about that, where if you come out as ace or aro, everyone immediately asks, well, why?
What happened?
Exactly. What happened? And number one, that goes off of this conclusion that something must have gone wrong. So number one, I'm already offended.
Yeah.
Nothing has to be wrong with me to have these be feelings.
Yeah.
But then you get into the real issue here, where it's like, okay, so even if in your assumption something must be wrong for anyone to feel this way, who the hell are you to just ask that out of the blue? And what makes you think it's
none
okay?
of your business.
Like, it's like, what's your deep dark trauma?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? It's like, who says that and then expects an answer?
Yeah.
And I feel like ace and aro people constantly get bombarded with this from everybody. Where it's like, give me a reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, number one, even if I had a reason, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
And who are you to demand an answer of me?
Yeah.
And number two, you're implying that there's automatically something wrong with me.
Yeah. And that's offensive.
It's extremely offensive no matter how you look at it. And it's just like, stop. Everyone stop.
So if there was an ideal... ace, or do for me, I know you're not aro, but maybe just for an experiment, what would be an ideal ace scenario in a media context?
Oh, good God.
I know, dude. I can't speak. And what would be a good aro media?
Aro media, literally not a plot line that involves romance, and not a plot line that involves failed romance.
Yeah.
Where even if you have an aro character... it's not one person who's just constantly pining after them. It would be really nice to get just a piece of media that just completely ignores romance.
Yeah.
Just completely, 100%. You can't even see any action movies or anything where there isn't some subplot of romance somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, even in a horror movie, there's always either a sexual undertone or a romantic undertone. Oh, this couple is together, and, you know, oh, this couple's having sex, and yada, yada. Like, there is no piece of media out there that I know of that just completely ignores romantic relationships as if they're not a thing the way an actual aro person thinks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't think in those terms, and I have not ever seen any media that comes from that perspective.
Yeah.
And even when it comes to asexuality, it's very difficult because I'm starting to see a little more representation in quote-unquote adult media. The one from BoJack Horseman, again, never watched it.
No.
So can't personally comment on that one. Alistair from Has Been Hotel, one of the best characters in my opinion. I relate so much where everyone tries to bring sexual things up and he just kind of like diverts.
Yeah.
He doesn't say anything about it. He doesn't say ew. He doesn't. It's just literally just, ha, no.
Nope.
I love it. Like, oh, absolutely great character. But other than that, when we talk about kind of more ace characters or ace-seeming characters, we get a lot of kids shows coming up.
Yeah.
That kind of frustrates me because, again, it very much makes asexuality feel like, especially because these characters, if you look at them for being ace, there's almost always something wrong with them.
Yeah.
For example, Peridot from Steven Universe.
Yeah.
Is not very good with people, period.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Peridot is also kind of non-canonically autistic.
She's too logical. She doesn't relate well with people. There's like a massive disconnect.
Yeah.
She seems kind of I don't want to say autistic, but she seems maybe Halo Asperger's or something like that. Like there's that sort of where she's like, I just don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's fine. But then you also get SpongeBob, who's just clueless all the time and, I don't understand. And again, very juvenile. They're asexual because they're juvenile.
Yeah.
And even when you think about animes or stuff like that, I know another one of the big ones is from, I've never watched the anime myself, so again, I can't really comment here. Luffy from One Piece, the anime. Is from what I've understood asexual and aromantic. But again, a very juvenile character, doesn't understand anything, and it's portrayed that the reason he's not romantic, the reason he's not a sexual character is because he's dumb and he doesn't understand anything and he's juvenile.
Yeah.
And I hate that because there are some of us out there who
just
aren't juvenile and we just don't have an interest.
Hello, I'm a human adult and I just don't want to have sex with you.
And I mean, we've talked before where I feel like media is oversaturated with sexuality.
Oh, for sure.
There is no piece of media other than maybe kids media that isn't sexual in some shape, way, or form.
Yeah.
And it is very frustrating to me because I'm left with the perspective of, it's not that I have anything against sex. I'm not sex negative. And I know that this probably makes me seem somewhat sex negative. But I'm all for your sexuality, live your truth, be who you are. But it is very frustrating to me to see every form of media just kind of using sex as a selling point because they just push it into your face and you're just kind of like not here for that. And I'm not uncomfortable with sex, but there are some ace people who are just like
sex repulsed,
exactly. And it makes me sad because if I'm annoyed by sex being pushed in my face, I can only imagine how these people have to feel when they're sex repulsed. What can they possibly watch that isn't
a kid's show,
literally disturbing to them, or a kid's show?
Yeah.
And as I said, even with aro people, when do you ever get an aro character that's not just immature?
Yeah.
Where they're perfectly mature, perfectly well-functioning,
Yeah.
perfectly formed, they're not disabled in any way, they're not, mentally disabled in any way, there's nothing wrong with them. Like, when do you ever see a character like that? Like, that's...
Ever.
It's so frustrating to me, just the lack of representation. And again, this is not a topic that I feel like anyone talks about because for whatever reason, it's still almost seen as like, oh, that's a shame. You're not sexual. You're immature in some way. You should hide until you get that fixed.
And I think that there is a whole myth behind storylines that do not include romance or sex aren't interesting. That's just not true. There's always self-improvement stories. Conquering challenges without those influences are interesting. Those stories are important and interesting.
It's just a shame that we really don't see a lot of that. It's kind of one of those things where, as I said, with almost any other form of media, you can be watching an action movie, you can be watching a horror movie. There will always be either a sexual undertone at some point or a romantic undertone at some point. And it's just like, okay, we get it. A majority of people like this content, but it would be really nice to find something out there that was just no.
Yeah.
Just purely based on the character from a character perspective and not on a relationship perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about friendships and everything else, but also can we stop with the whole, it's an ace character and they have like, this friend, but this friend is pining after them secretly. And it's just like, no.
That's just, I don't like that trope.
Why can't an ace character just be an ace character? And why can't an arrow character just be an arrow character?
I think that's always another toxic thing around that is if there are ace people or arrow people, they're always expected to change for a person.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, they were ace until they met the right person, or they were arrow, and then they realized that the friend who was a friend all along was actually a romantic interest, and they just didn't know it.
Yeah.
It's like, no! Arrow is arrow!
I mean, there could be people like that, but it's the insinuation that all arrow people are like that.
It's the insinuation that all relationships must come to either a sexual or romantic conclusion, or every person must find a romantic or a sexual partner of some sort.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, there are some people out there who don't want either. There are some people who only want one aspect. There are arrow people who are fine with having sex, but just no attachments.
Yeah.
There are asexual people who want a loving relationship, but just don't want the sex to go along with it. And I feel like the two go so hand in hand that there is almost no way to separate the two. If you're going to be, I hate to say it, but again, I feel like you can have no strings attached sex, and that seems fairly acceptable. We're not going to get into slut shaming and everything, which is absolutely a thing. And I'm not saying it's not a thing, but, that is still an acceptable form of relationship. I feel like having a loving relationship without sex, how many times is it a joke? Our relationship has gone stale. I'm falling out of love with this person. We don't even have sex anymore.
Not having sex is a problem. It's an issue. Like
literally, it's something that causes a relationship to fall apart. It's just kind of like, there are those of us out there that have no interest in ever doing it. And so are you telling me that if I say no because I'm uncomfortable and don't want it, that every single relationship I could ever possibly have will fall apart unless I find another ace person?
Yeah. It's just teaching you things that aren't true.
And it's so hard because, again, there is such a lack of representation where, you could look at me and say, well, that's not true. But I'm just left sitting here going, show me where.
Yeah.
Show me where that's not true, because every piece of evidence that I have leads me to the conclusion that is simply the way it will be for the rest of forever for me. Where it's like, you will never have a happy relationship unless either you give in or your relationship is guaranteed to fall apart at some point because you won't put out. And that bothers me quite a bit because, again, it goes back to me questioning myself. And that's where I said, when I first started really coming to the realization that I was ace, I felt a little horrified because I realized what that meant for my future.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this means that I am never going to be able to be happy. And that's fucked up that I have been led to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And yet I can't seem to turn any other way because there's no representation where an ace person gets a happy ending.
You can see someone being who you are later.
Exactly. There's nothing. And it's so sad because, you came out and Charlie came out and you guys were happy and excited. You're like, oh my God, this is a new world.
Yeah.
For me, it was like spiraling down into a pit. And I was like,
this is terrifying.
God, what does this actually mean for me?
Yeah.
Not only do I not have representation, not only are people questioning me, and not only is my sexual state seen as juvenile and immature, but everything I'm seeing says that there is no way for you to have a good, permanent, stable, happy relationship. Yeah. It will always fall apart because you are flawed as a person.
Do you think that having more media in favor of ace and arrow sexualities will help people who are growing up ace or arrow?
Absolutely. If I had seen something that I understood to be ace or understood to be arrow, I may have been a lot more comfortable with my coming out journey. I may have realized who and what I was a lot earlier. And again, it's still up in the air even for me, where I could be asexual, I could be gray sexual. Yeah. I don't know for sure. Yeah. So I would like to just preface this by saying right now I identify as ace. But again, I feel the need to explain myself. Like, I'm even catching myself doing it now. I feel the need to explain, I may be, but I might not be. And I hate that I feel like I have to do that. Yeah. It's just a constant urge.
So I think we hope that in future times there is going to be more put out there.
I hope the way that gay media has been able to move forward and blossom. I hope to start seeing a lot more ace content and romantic content for people like me who it took me forever to even discover that this was a thing.
Yeah.
And even now I am struggling with this idea that I will never be happy because I am a flawed person.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to celebrate who I am, I almost feel like I'm condemned for who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who are like me and are completely denying who they are because they are unable to come to the realization that I will be unhappy for forever.
Oh, yeah.
And so they just go, no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I did it for so long.
Yeah.
I'm not. I will be happy. With the right person, I will be happy.
Yeah.
And it's just, I would love to see that representation where people don't feel the need to explain themselves, where they don't feel the need to deny who they are because instead of it being a positive coming out, it is nothing but just this
terror.
Despair.
Yeah.
Going, oh my God, what does this mean for me? This is terrible. This is the worst thing that could have happened. Oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I just want it to be more positive. And I think representation is a major step on that pathway.
Yeah. So, yay.
Kind of a somber end here, but that's all. Thank you for listening to Abby rant for like 25 minutes. I get aggravated about this subject.
You can get aggravated.
I hate it.
It's personal. You gotta go for it. Okay, well, we hope you like this episode, guys. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook. We got YouTube. We do vlogs. Obviously, Abby's here.
Sometimes we do interesting things.
If you need ace representation, watch our vlogs. Look at Abby.
I will be your representation.
Yes.
I will be your representation of cynical ace person.
Yeah.
Is there any other way that I would want to be?
No.
All right, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening.
Take it gay by gay, guys.
Bye.